Hey, Justin here with CBI Off-Road. Today we're working on a 3rd generation Tacoma. We're installing our Covert front bumper. We'll show you how to get it installed. All right, so we're gonna start by just kind of laying everything out, doing a quick inspection, make sure everything's here. Of course, you need your bumper. I've already put our winch in there, but if you have any of those accessories, make sure you have that to go along with it. This is our bull bar. This is an optional bolt-on product with the associated brackets. Here's our cover plate that goes down underneath with the winch fairly cut out. And we have our side support brackets here. We have some trim lock to cover up any discrepancies with our cut. This hardware bag is for the side support brackets, and this is your bumper hardware as well as the power steering line relocation hardware. So make sure everything's there, make sure it all is as expected as you ordered it, and we'll get to install. All right, so there's 2 bolts under here. They're a 10mm that we need to remove to allow this to drop out after we cut it. And I went ahead and Sharpied the cut line on here. This is a total rough cut, so be as sloppy as you want, not that big a deal. We're gonna sand it clean, so there's no worry there. It's not gonna be a finished product, but we'll get these bolts out and show you a close-up of this cut line right now. All right, so we got that trim piece out of the way. There's just a couple of these black plastic clips in here. We'll just use a screwdriver, kind of pop these straight out. But our final cut line, we're gonna cut it again now that we got that out of our way, is gonna be right in this crack between this piece and this piece. So that line will follow all the way around, just like that, in that same little crack. So you can draw that line. We'll use our same air saw. We'll get that cut. This one, we're gonna be a little more careful that we follow that line. And in fact, we can even cut out here and do some sanding towards it, whatever you're comfortable with. Probably play it safe and sand to the bumper, because you can always take more off. You can't add more to the vehicle once it's off. So we'll go ahead and mark this out and get our line adjusted. All right, so now that our plastic's out of the way, we're gonna remove this kind of crash bar plastic cover, and then we'll start sanding. But this is clipped in on these sides. You just simply push them in and pull out towards you, and it will release this plastic piece. You just kind of keep working around and feel where those clips are and depress them, and then it'll finally let you have it. All right, so now that we got everything sanded, I'm gonna take this deburr tool and just kind of go along and get rid of all these plastic pieces and just kind of smooth this out. And if we see any high areas, we'll go ahead and get the sander back out and take care of that. Once we get all that done, then we'll get this trim lock installed, and it's just gonna follow our cut line here, and we'll just push it up until it locks into place. But start with deburr, get that all the way going, sand if needed, and then trim lock. All right, so our next step is we're gonna remove this crash bar, and there's three 14mm bolts on each side, as well as one 10mm bolt on each underside that we'll need to take off to get the crash bar out. All right, so with the crash bar out of the way, there's a few other things we need to remove. These crash bar mounting adapters, we need to take those out. There's three 14mm nuts on each side. We need to save that hardware because we'll need it to reinstall the Covert. This tow hook needs to come out. There's two 17mm bolts. This in piece, one 17mm bolt on each side, and the skid plate comes off, and there's four 12mm bolts, two in the front and two in the rear that we'll need to remove to get the skid plate down. So we'll go ahead and get all that stuff down and proceed. All right, so our next step is we're gonna cut these little plastic pieces off, just kind of level with the bottom of the bumper. There's one on each side. We'll zoom in close and give you a shot of the cut line. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna loosen up and remove the bolts on this power steering line. They're 12mm, there's one on each side and then one around the corner on top of the frame. And then we'll also be removing the sway bar bolts, and there's two on each side. They're a 14mm, so we'll just remove those and let the sway bar just kind of sit right in here. So we'll start with the power steering, move to the sway bar. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna install our relocation brackets for these power steering lines. So there's some 1/4" hardware that came in there that's gonna actually mount in here like so. The power steering will mount to this side, and then the factory bolt will mount to this side. So what that's doing is just relocating it back about a couple of inches just so we have clearance for our new bumper. So we'll go ahead and get these installed. Here. All right, now what we're gonna do is we have these kind of ears next to our mounting locations that we need to either cut off or bend out of the way. The front one's easy to hit with a hammer. You can get to it, so we'll probably bend the front one in, and then this back one will cut off. That's the same on both sides. And then this tow hook right here, we'll just cut off flush with this crossbar right here, and then make sure we put some paint on our cut surfaces to eliminate any possibility for rust. All right, so if you're installing your bumper with a winch or a light bar on it, it's a good idea to take off the grill. It's just gonna open it up so you can run your wiring cleanly and reach everything and do your solenoid relocation kit on your winch. If you're not running a winch or a light bar, you're ready to go. Just get your bumper in there. But other than that, to get the grill off, we got two 10mm bolts and 2 clips on each side, and then we'll just pull straight out to get this out. All right, so we're working on getting our bumper ready to go. We got our winch in here. This is a Warren 10,000 pound synthetic line, and we have our 30-inch single row Heretic amber light bar. We need to get our bull bar installed. I'll show you how to do that. But if you're not running a bull bar, you're pretty much ready to go with this configuration as long as your winch is in. We're gonna be doing a solenoid relocation kit because the grill support will be right here, so that would interfere with our solenoid on our winch. So we're gonna relocate that. But with that, if you're not doing your bull bar, as long as you got your light and your winch, you're good to go. I'll show you how to get the bull bar on. Okay, so when installing the bull bar, we got 4 holes on each side, and it's gonna match up to these elongated holes in the bumper on each side, and then we'll capture it with this backing plate on the inside of the bumper. So we'll zoom in close and show you how this goes. Okay, it goes like that. Okay, now we'll move to the other side, same process. All right, so we just got our bumper in place. I have our 3 nuts on each side started. We're just gonna run them to hand tight. We're not gonna tighten them with a wrench yet because we're gonna go underneath and get our hardware so we can make our adjustments and get that tuned in where we want it. And then we'll get our side support brackets in, and these will be the last that we tighten down. So we'll get started on the underneath, move to the side support bracket, and come back to these guys. All right, so this is our bottom bolt. This is gonna set the height of your bumper. So you wanna calibrate it based on washers and spacing in between these 2 surfaces. So we want it sitting about 2 washers down. Your truck may be a little different, so play with your height. So we'll slip in these 2 washers, and we got our bolt here. The head on this bolt is gonna be a 19mm, and it's kinda tight, but you can reach in here and get this nut started. So we're just gonna get this hand tight for now. We're not gonna tighten it yet because if it's tight, then we won't be able to get our washers in on the other side. So with this started, kind of loosely like that, we can move to the other side, do the same process. All right, now that everything's hand tight, we're gonna go ahead and take our 19mm, snug these down, and move on to the side support brackets. All right, so our next step is we need to pry out this plastic cover. I'm just gonna use a flathead screwdriver. Once we pry this out, we'll stick the screwdriver into the hole and tap one out that's on the other side of the frame as well. We'll need to get those removed to get the side support brackets installed. All right, so now our side support bracket's going in. Kind of a tight fit, but just kind of snake it around until this hole lines up. We're using our longer bolt, a strut washer, and a flange nut. So insert the bolt all the way through the frame and use your strut washer first and then thread on your flange nut. We're just gonna do this hand tight right now until we get all the bolts in place. All right, so now we're gonna take our smaller bolts, washer and flange nut, and get them installed right here. And same thing, just get it hand tight for right now until everything's in place. This is kind of a hard reach, but kind of work your hand in on the underside until you feel that bolt, and then get it started. Okay, next thing, we'll get our factory bolts back in the sway bar and start getting everything tightened down. These sway bar bolts, we're just gonna leave them hand tight right now. We'll tighten up the rest of the support bracket, but we'll want this kind of loose so that we can get the bracket in on the other side. All right, so now we're gonna tighten down the side support brackets. These two bolts up here are gonna be a 16 millimeter. The main bolt going through the frame is also 16 millimeter. Now's a good time to go ahead and tighten down our 14 millimeter nuts that bolt the bumper to the frame. And then we can also tie this inner fender liner back into its same bolt with the 10 millimeter that we removed earlier. So we'll go ahead and get these locked down. All right, now we're getting ready to install our cover plate here. So we'll take our clip nuts and we'll just slide them over the hole and tap them into place with a hammer. There's gonna be 6 of these, 5. There's 3 on the bottom and 2 up top. So we'll go ahead and get these pounded on. Okay, so with our clip nuts in place, it's time to get this plate mounted up. So make sure if you have a winch that you stretch your cable through the opening so that you're able to stretch your cable all the way out. Now we're just gonna be going hand tight with our button head Allen's stainless steel for right now. Once we get them all started, then we'll tighten them down. They're a 7/32 Allen to tighten them. Okay, so now we can tighten the inside 14 millimeter mounting nut on each side. Now we can access those through here. Once we get all your light bar and your wiring for your winch routed, grill can go back on and button everything down. All right, guys, that sums up today's install tutorial of the 3rd generation Covert front bumper on the Tacoma. Hope it was helpful and informative for you. Don't forget, like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Thanks.